Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Unsolved Ramblings with me, your host, Danielle. If you are new here, I ramble and speculate about unsolved missing persons cases in hopes of shedding light so that these families can be that much closer to some answers. Join me each week for new episodes. Before I dive right in, I'd like to state that I am not an expert and that this is for entertainment purposes. All my info comes from what has been published online. All online sources are linked in the description of this video. Today, we are going to talk about the disappearance of Christopher Hoye. It is baffling his friends and investigators. He went missing from Dixon, Missouri on May 19th, 2022. Chris is described as a 33-year-old white male standing at 5'6", weighing at about 175 pounds. Chris has brown, shaggy hair and a full brown beard with hazel eyes. He took off in his truck from his home and has not been seen again. Chris was born Christopher James Hoye on March 16, 1989, to Dan and Tina Hoye. Chris grew up in Peoria, Illinois. Chris is the oldest of two children. Him and his sister Ashley had a seemingly normal childhood. Being the oldest, Chris always looked out for Ashley as a protector. Teresa, Chris's aunt, stated in interviews growing up, Chris was goofy, always liked to make people happy. In his younger years, Chris attended a Christian private school. Strong in their faith and beliefs, Dan and Tina felt this was the best for both their children. Dan stated in interviews that Chris loved baseball from a young age, so much so that they started him with t-ball. He went on to Little League, and by the time he reached his teenage years, he was an excellent pitcher. In high school, Dan and Tina let the kids decide if they wanted to attend private or public school. Chris chose public school. He went and he pitched for his high school baseball team and led them to state championship titles. After high school, Chris's interests changed to more hands-on trades, such as machinery and carpentry. Chris is good with his hands. He loves fixing up cars and building things. Chris went to school for Caterpillar diesel mechanics and worked with them for a long time. Everyone who knows Chris knows he is a hard worker, but he didn't like jobs that controlled him. Teresa stated in interviews that any job Chris had taken that controlled him, he really didn't like and would not stay long, but that he always had a drive to better himself. After the Caterpillar job, he started buying up old rundown houses. He was doing what he loved, working with his hands and turning the houses into homes. It would not be long until Chris met a woman named Cynthia. Chris was crazy about her. Dan stated that he didn't understand what Chris had seen in Cynthia. Dan described Cynthia as a jealous and overprotective woman. Teresa and Dan both agreed that no one on their side of the family liked her. Cynthia would often get upset with something Chris said, and then she would slap him hard in the arm. It appeared to family members that the relationship was very volatile. Nonetheless, the two were together long enough to have a daughter and a son together. According to Teresa, though, one day Cynthia was just gone, and Chris went to court and fought for full custody of his kids. Teresa stated that he was a wonderful, devoted father. Being a father changed Chris. Teresa also stated in interviews with the Vanished podcast that Chris had always had the dream of having a large farm with animals and lots of kids running around. By 2017, Chris is taking care of all his properties. He has become a real estate agent and is the sole provider for his two children. In November of 2017 is when Chris meets his current wife, Alicia Hoye. Alicia stated in interviews that at first, she kind of brushed Chris off. She wasn't interested in anything, just at the bar to meet a friend and shoot some pool. It wasn't until Chris started talking about his kids that made Alicia pause. Alicia is a teacher for students with special needs. Chris's daughter has special needs, and that drew Alicia in. Alicia stated that Chris is an extrovert, made friends very easily. He's outgoing and the best dad ever. When she met him, he had so much going for him. He was a realtor and a notary. Alicia and Chris were smitten with one another. Even Dan says that Alicia was a better match for Chris than Cynthia. Teresa stated that you could tell that Chris had a bright future with Alicia. Chris had had such a bad past in picking the wrong women, but this time he seemed to be in luck. Alicia has a daughter from a previous relationship. Her name is Zoe. Alicia stated that Chris quickly fell into the role of a father for Zoe. Zoe was 15 at the time that she came into Chris's life, and Zoe stated in interviews that Chris has had a profound effect on her life. She couldn't ask for a better man to step up and be her father. So much so, Zoe even legally changed her name to Hoye. Alicia and Chris get married and welcome another little girl into their family. Things are going well. Chris is working and providing a very good life for his blended family. Then 2020 comes into view and COVID hits the Hoyes hard. Their businesses are shut down. They can't make any money off their rental houses due to government regulations. Their Airbnbs are not making any income. They are losing money every month. They decide to cut their losses, sell off their remaining properties, and buy a farm in Missouri. Dixon, Missouri to be exact. At first, the homesteading life is a little difficult, but nothing Chris hadn't done before. Chris and Alicia begin rebuilding their lives along with their farm, piece by piece. They took an old run-down house, remodeled it, and turned it into a nice home for the family. They had cows, goats, chickens, and ducks. They have a huge garden. Chris and Alicia wanted to live off the land as much as possible. Alicia worked outside of the home, and Chris was a stay-at-home dad. Chris is so proud of the farm and all he had done to accomplish this dream. He was so happy with the simple life. He would work odd jobs to make extra money. Things were going well. It was the fresh start that he had needed. Then, on May 19th, 2022, at around 6:30 p.m., Chris gets into his truck, drives off, and no one has seen him again. Alicia recounted that day to the producers of Investigation Discovery's docuseries Disappeared. They woke up together just as they did every morning, did their early morning chores, feeding animals and so forth. Then Alicia headed off to work. She did speak to Chris briefly on her break, and he seemed fine. At 2:15, Alicia arrived home from work. The Weather Service had issued a tornado warning, and their property had a tendency of flooding, so the pair worked tirelessly in the rain to try to prevent major flooding and damage to the property. Alicia stated everything was normal with Chris. Between 3 and 4, they finished up making sure the property was secured. Soaking wet, Chris decides to go take a shower. Once the shower is over, knowing they have more chores to do before the day is over, Alicia states she is going to go milk the goats and heads out the back door. She is heading to the pen where they keep the goats, and she hears a truck start up and drive away. By the time she reaches the front of the house, Chris's truck is gone. Kind of upset that he didn't say where he was going and left without a kiss, she goes inside to ask their son where he went. The boy says, "I don't know. He told me to go to my room." Alicia immediately texts her daughter Zoe and heads out to the porch to try to calm down. That's when she notices that Chris's cell phone and wallet are laying on the table on the porch. Now this is very unlike Chris. He has never left without telling Alicia where he is going. He never leaves without taking his cell phone. She is panicking. Alicia calls a friend and asks if they can come and sit with the kids. Chris took off and she needs to go look for him. By the time Alicia gets to go look for Chris, 2.5 hours have gone by. Alicia stated that something in her gut told her to go look down by the river. When she pulls into the river access, as she has so many times before with her family, as this is their favorite swimming hole, she notices Chris's blue GMC Sierra sitting about a football field's distance away from the river. She rushes to the truck hoping to find Chris, but finds it empty. She immediately calls the police and files a missing persons report. Alicia states that the first detective on the case took it very seriously and started investigating right away. Authorities organized a massive search party utilizing dogs, drones, and sonar. They searched 10 miles upriver and 10 miles downriver. They also searched the surrounding woods around these areas where his truck was found. No trace of Chris has been found other than his truck with the keys inside. The dogs did pick up his scent, but we will get to that later. There was one clue that puzzled investigators. They found a cigarette butt in the truck. Alicia told authorities that it is not the brand that Chris smoked. Authorities were able to extract DNA from the cigarette. However, they have not been able to produce a match to that DNA. It wasn't until June 5th of 2022 that Dan, Chris's father, learns that Chris is missing. Dan and Chris had a very rocky relationship and hadn't spoken to each other in a while. Dan wasn't even aware that Chris and Alicia had moved to Missouri. Tina, Dan's wife, Chris's mother, passed away several years ago from cancer, and right about the time Dan remarried is when his and Chris's relationship started being strained. Dan stated in the Vanished podcast that when he first heard the news, his first thought was that Chris committed suicide. Teresa didn't immediately think about suicide. No, she thought he would turn up. She had witnessed him attempting to run from his problems before. He had left his parents' home as a teen, and it was Teresa who found him sleeping in his truck in a parking lot and convinced him to go back home. Sadly, she had not spoken to Chris for some time, probably before they moved to Missouri. Teresa stated even though they had moved, when Chris went missing, she started looking around Illinois for Chris in his old stomping grounds, thinking that if he had run from his problems like he had done before, maybe he would run back to that area. She never found any traces of Chris. There have been 3 possible sightings of Chris, 2 in Lebanon, Missouri, and 1 in Festus, Missouri. But both of those leads have not helped investigators move their investigation along. By the time that Alicia came into their lives, Chris's 2 children from the previous relationship were 18 months old and 3 years old. At the time of Chris's disappearance, they were 6 and 8. And Alicia and Chris were the only parents that they could count on for the last several years. However, as soon as Cynthia learned of Chris's disappearance, she swooped in and took her kids back. Alicia is not even sure how Cynthia found out that Chris was missing. Cynthia told authorities that she found out from Zoe's Facebook. Alicia says that that's impossible because Zoe's settings are private. I did go to Zoe's Facebook page to check it out for myself, and I was able to see the post that she posted about Chris's disappearance. So it could be 100% plausible that Cynthia found out from Zoe's Facebook page. Alicia is fighting in court for visitation. She says that she wants her children to still be able to have a relationship with their siblings. Alicia stated she has been able to see them 3 times and has had a video call with them once. Alicia stated during the podcast with The Vanished that Chris leaving wrecked everything they were trying to build, but that she does not believe he would commit suicide. She also said that Chris's frame of mind in the past year was a little off. Chris had told Alicia that he was overwhelmed and that he didn't know if they were going to make it. Chris was very upset about losing his property in Peoria. Chris told Alicia that he felt like a failure. Alicia says that she reassured Chris he wasn't a failure and to take a look around at all that they had built for themselves. She said that she thought that it seemed as if he was pulling himself out of this funk that he had landed in. There are several theories that investigators are throwing around. Suicide is the first one. All the signs point to Chris wanting to commit suicide, but investigators are baffled as to why they have not found any traces of Chris. No clothes, no remains. Their second theory is that he was overwhelmed and he left. But if Chris had a history of running from his problems, then there is the possibility that he could be out there somewhere. However, friends and family say that Chris would not leave his children like this. Not after he fought so hard for them to be with him. Why would you up and leave with no clothes, no phone, no wallet? It's not adding up. Their third theory is that he was kidnapped or he met foul play of some sort. The evidence the authorities have to go on is the dogs. The dogs picked up Chris's scent and followed it from the truck back up to the highway, and the dogs lost the scent there. Is it possible that Chris walked back up to the highway and someone hurt him or dragged him away or he got a ride? It's possible, but no one has any concrete answers. Just the one question: where is Christopher Hoye? Alicia still resides on their farm, hoping her husband will come home one day. Zoe and her husband moved from Illinois to Missouri to help Alicia with the farm. This case does have a lot of questions. For me, there are a lot of things that are not adding up. Chris, described by everyone as well-liked, fun to be around, a wonderful, devoted father, and he just up and leaves his family and kids behind. They found his truck with the keys inside down by the river. The river is the Gasconade River. I have personally seen parts of this river, and I was always warned to stay away. Is it possible that Chris was down by the river attempting to get some peace and to think about things? He went down to touch the water and fell in. There had been storms, so the river was probably rushing that day. But again, why have there been no traces of his body? Going back to the evidence of the dogs following his scent up to the highway where overlooking the river is the Veterans Bridge of Highway 28. Did he jump from the bridge into the water? I don't believe that he took off and is out there living his best life. I just have not heard of many cases where someone already struggling emotionally and financially would take off for parts unknown without his cell phone and his wallet and then never contact his kids, wife, or family again. This theory makes no sense to me. My speculations are that he probably did commit suicide and the authorities have been unable to locate the body. It is a sad tale of another family ripped apart, unable to have any answers or closure. Chris is listed as a missing person on the Missouri Highway Patrol's website, and he was recently added to NamUs. NamUs is a national clearinghouse and resource center for missing, unidentified, and unclaimed people throughout the United States. There are currently 12 states that have laws in place that require authorities to report information to NamUs. Those states are New York, California, Washington, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Illinois, Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, and Connecticut. Missouri is not required to use NamUs. Authorities in Missouri use NCIC, a database which is only utilized by law enforcement. The public have access to NamUs. Anybody can use the resource. Now, in order for this to be changed, it will take a bill to be passed. We definitely need to get started on that. There are over 600 people missing in Missouri right now. We definitely need to get some new laws passed to where authorities are required to investigate and required to report the information that they have to all of the national databases that are out there. Regardless, if you have any information that could lead investigators to Chris's whereabouts, please contact the Pulaski County Sheriff's Office at 573-774-6196. They also have set up a tip line at 573-774-7948. Thank you so much for joining me today. The case of missing Chris Hoye has yet to be solved. Police are still looking for answers. Let's help them by sharing and getting Chris's information out there so his family can finally have some closure. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more Unsolved Ramblings. And remember, my friends, ramble on.